selling out the Forum. You know, first Madison Square Garden, now the Forum. And he's doing it because the fans just want to see him in the ring, regardless of who he fights against.
Tom, obviously.
Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So it was just reported yesterday that Luis King Kong Ortiz has finally bought out his contract when it comes to Golden Boy Promotions. He's no longer with Golden Boy Promotions, and now he's a free agent. Ironically enough, when I think of fighters leaving a promoter and buying out contracts, I think of two fighters. I think of Floyd Mayweather, and I think of Oscar De La Hoya. They both did buyouts when they left Top Rank. You know, I'm starting to wonder who's having the worst year right now, Top Rank or Golden Boy Promotions. We just heard a week before this news that HBO decided to pass on who was perceived as their biggest star they've had in the last 10 years outside of Floyd Mayweather, and that was Manny Pacquiao. Now this week we hear that Luis Ortiz, he walks out on Golden Boy Promotions. Whoever you would pick when it comes to having the worst year, just keep in mind when it comes to Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy Promotions, they just lost a possible future heavyweight champion of the world in King Kong Ortiz. When you think about the fact that this is at a time where the heavyweight division is popping now. The heavyweight division is bigger than it has been in the last 10 years. With talents like Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, and Luis Ortiz pretty much being their equals, if not superior to some of those fighters I just mentioned. So this is not a good look for Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy Promotions. You guys all know by now, there were countless articles of Al Heyman going broke, and this is the beginning of the end for Al Heyman, and that turned out to be a manufactured story that was not true. In fact, it is quite the contrary. Because while Al Heyman is having the best year, Oscar De La Hoya, Top Rank, and HBO, they're having their worst year. And I don't know who King Kong is going to go with, if he's going to go with Rock Nation, because I hear that his fight with Alexander Ustinov will most likely be on the Andre Ward versus Kovalev undercard, which is obviously a Rock Nation promotion. If he decides to go with Rock Nation and Andre Ward pulls off that huge win over Sergey Kovalev, that definitely puts Rock Nation on the map, because now they have the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world, Andre Ward, and they have one of the best heavyweights, if not the best heavyweight in the world right now, Luis King Kong Ortiz. Or Ortiz, he could go with Al Heyman in the PBC series. I mean, he has a lot of options. But when you look at the contrast, Al Heyman versus Golden Boy Promotions, when you look at the deep roster that Al Heyman has, is there really any contest when it comes to Golden Boy, or even Top Rank at that matter? I mean, just look at all of the talent in the Al Heyman stable. You have Gervonta Tank Davis. And keep in mind, guys, because Floyd Mayweather, he made this very clear. He said that TMT and Al Heyman Promotions is pretty much the same thing. He said it's no different than saying Mayweather Promotions or saying TMT. It's all the same thing. So with that being said, Al Heyman has Keith Thurman and Sean Porter, who coincidentally were in the most watched fight this year until Errol Spence broke that record and became the most watched fight probably in the last 10, 20 years, right? And let me just touch on those views, those 6 million views that PBC Series pulled in for the Spence fight. Now, obviously, we know that they were able to generate those type of numbers because they scheduled this fight immediately following the Olympic basketball game, right? So when you say that that was just a smart business move, isn't Al Heyman, isn't Bob Arum, isn't Oscar De La Hoya, aren't they all businessmen? They're all businessmen, right? So what you basically just said about Al Heyman is the only reason this businessman was successful at putting this fight right next to the Olympics on NBC is because obviously that was a good business move. That's what you just said about Al Heyman. The only reason this businessman was successful is because he's a smart businessman. That's what you basically just said. This is no different than a taco truck or a hot dog stand guy setting up shop right outside of the Staples Center because they know that after the fight or after the basketball game, thousands of fans are going to leave the arena and they're going to walk right past all of these hot dog stands and taco trucks, etc., etc. If I were to tell you, wow, that is a smart business move, are you going to really come back at me and say, oh man, come on. The only reason they made thousands of dollars selling hot dogs in one night is because that big fight came on at the Staples Center. And this taco truck was smart enough to put their taco truck right next to the Staples Center. Come on, man. You can't give them credit for that. This is how ridiculous the decaf sounds when they're talking about this brilliant business move that Al Heyman just made. Let me give you one more example. Let's say I'm an insurance agent, right? And I work on commission selling policies to the clients. Now one day I sell insurance to some random walk-in, right? And this guy, not only does he buy a policy from me, but he ends up bringing 20 of his family members in to buy policies from me as well. So now I'm having a better month than anyone in the office. And I end up getting Employee of the Month because I sold way more policies than anyone else. Do you know how stupid one of my coworkers would look if he went up to the manager and said, hey, boss, I just want to let you know, Dante, the only reason he sold more policies than everyone is because he got a whole lot of referrals from one or some of his clients. Do you know how stupid you would look if you told your boss that? This is how stupid these fans sound when they sit over here and say, the only reason so many people watch this fight because Al Heyman scheduled the fight at a time when millions of people would already be watching free TV on NBC. Do you know how ridiculous that sounds? That is exactly what you are supposed to do. Why do you guys think Canelo Alvarez fights on Mexican holidays? Why do you guys think Canelo is fighting in Texas and not in New York? Because you put yourself in a position to maximize your revenue and your exposure. I mean, that's only common sense, right? But like I said before, hindsight is always 20/20. So it's easy for people to say after the fact, oh, the only reason he was so successful is because he did this and because he did that. Well, if it was so obvious, that's the reason why this idea was successful, how come Oscar De La Hoya didn't come up with this idea? How come Bob Arum didn't come up with this idea? How come you fans that sit over here and say that's the only reason they were successful, how come you didn't reach out to Oscar De La Hoya or Top Rank and say, hey guys, why don't you guys put one of these big fights right next to the Olympics, the USA basketball game? Why don't you put it on free TV on the same channel? How come you didn't say that? The reason why you didn't say that is because it's much easier to say after the fact, right? You also have to take into consideration Al Heyman was the person, he was the only person that was smart enough to pay for a slot on NBC so that he can benefit from moments like this, the Olympics, basketball games, right? You guys can't say anybody can do it because Al Heyman was the only man that was smart enough to pay for an NBC slot. So you can't say anyone could have done it because no one else was in position to do it. The wheels have been set in motion for quite some time, is what you guys are not realizing. I mean, it's no different than a decaf saying the only reason Al Heyman was so successful was because he paid for that NBC slot like a year ago or 2 years ago. That is essentially what you guys are saying. Do you see how ridiculous that sounds? So anyway, with me saying all of that, this is the reason why Oscar De La Hoya, Golden Boy Promotions, they're not doing good right now. With Al Heyman breaking records when it comes to TV ratings, with him having all of the stars, I mean, just look at the roster. Look at the roster of talent when it comes to Al Heyman. Keith Thurman, Sean Porter, Errol Spence, Danny Garcia, Javante Tank Davis, Erickson Lubin, the Charlo brothers, Arthur Beterbiev, Leo Santa Cruz, Gary Russell, Carl Frampton, and I am only naming a small percentage. The pool is far more deeper than that. But when it comes to Golden Boy Promotions, who do they have? Canelo Alvarez. And quite frankly, there's no guarantee Canelo Alvarez is even going to last that much longer, guys. I mean, let's just be realistic. I mean, right now, he cherry-picked Liam Smith, thinking that Liam Smith was the easiest target or easiest opponent. He may be right, he may be wrong. One thing about Liam Smith is he is a natural junior middleweight. Now, he is slower than a Canelo Alvarez, but he's very aggressive. And we know that when Canelo Alvarez is dealing with pressure, he often takes minutes off in the rounds. And he won't be able to do that against a fighter that constantly comes forward. Unless all of a sudden Liam Smith gets cold feet like David Lemieux did when he was fighting against Gennady Golovkin. But if Liam Smith applies a lot of pressure and he does it for 12 whole rounds, this should be a very, very interesting fight. Canelo Alvarez is also talking about moving up to middleweight after this fight. You have to understand something. There's a reason why Canelo refused to move up to middleweight for so long. Because Canelo Alvarez, he has gotten extremely comfortable with his size advantage over a lot of these fighters. Canelo Alvarez, he realizes that if he moves up in weight, he'll be facing guys that rehydrate around the same amount of weight that he rehydrates to. Therefore, the massive size advantage is reduced. Okay? Canelo understands that. Gennady Golovkin understands that as well. That's why he stayed at 160 for quite some time. And they're talking about moving up eventually to 168. But I'm telling you, I mean, once again, all fighters can't just move up in multiple weight classes and be as dominant as they were in the smaller weight classes. Because a lot of these fighters, they rely on one component, and that's power. They don't have plan A, B, and C just in case power doesn't work. Special fighters like Andre Ward, Guillermo Rigo, Floyd Mayweather. They are the exceptions. And I would say maybe even Lomachenko, but once again, we have to see how Lomachenko does against Salido in a rematch, because still we don't know if that was just him being inexperienced or he's going to always have problems with that type of style. But getting back to Canelo Alvarez and Golden Boy Promotions' dilemma, once again, this is not a good look for them. I mean, the rumors were already running rampant that Golden Boy, they really only care about Canelo Alvarez. And regardless if that was true or not, obviously Luis Ortiz, he kind of felt that way. So I guess that says something right there. So yeah, man, we'll see where Luis Ortiz goes from here. Like I told you guys before, Ortiz, if he beats Alexander Usanov, I believe he will be the mandatory for Tyson Fury versus Vladimir Klitschko rematch winner. So he has options to either fight one of those guys, or he could sign with Al Heyman and he'll have access to Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder. But regardless, even if he doesn't sign with them, he'll still have access to fighting those guys or facing them. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future, or the very near future. That's all I got, guys. I'm on to the next one.
Hi, my name is Janita and you're watching Dante's Boxing Nation.